ulusal ve ülke perspektifleri başlıklı oturumumuz başlayacak. Moderatörlüğünü OECD Türkiye Daimi Temsilcisi Sayın Büyükelçi Mithat Rende'nin yapacağı bölümümüzde konuşmacılarımız Portekiz Eski Dışişleri Bakanı Antonio Martins de CRUZ, İslam Kalkınma Bankası Başkan Danışmanı El Mansur Feten, Kore Uluslararası İşbirliği Ajansı Başkan Yardımcısı Jung-Soo DOO, Birleşmiş Milletler Kalkınma Programı Türkiye Temsilcisi ve Birleşmiş Milletler Yerleşik Koordinatörü Kamal MALHOTRA konuşmacılarımıza sahneye alıyoruz. Teşekkür ediyoruz.
Dr. Serdar Çam, President of KOICA, Dr. Burhanettin Duran, General Coordinator of SETA, distinguished participants, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor and privilege for me to attend this important international conference on the changing of development aid from past to future. I would like to start by thanking KOICA and SETA for having organized this timely event. I would also like to extend a warm welcome to all of you who arrived from abroad and wish you a pleasant stay in Istanbul. Dear participants, we are gathered here today at a time when the world is faced with unprecedented economic, social, and environmental challenges that have global implications. We live in a world which is more interdependent than at any other time in human history. The benefits of globalization are not shared equally. Moreover, in 2008, economic and financial crisis has further led to slowing down of growth, increase in unemployment, fall in investment levels, and an overall lack of trust and confidence towards governments as well as international institutions. Recent developments in the Middle East and North Africa, as well as the ongoing situation in Ukraine, the adverse effects of climate change are all new developments that need to be addressed. Obviously, these challenges and megatrends have direct bearings on the topic of development. Issues such as unemployment, inequality, poverty, again, climate change, scarcity of natural resources, lack of access to food and energy have implications for everyone. The prevailing economic environment, ladies and gentlemen, puts heavy pressure on and prevents traditional donor states from fulfilling their commitments in development aid. However, we would keep in mind that development aid is an important contributor to inclusive and sustainable growth at a global level. It's also essential for addressing poverty and inequalities. Official development assistance, ODA, remains an important source of finance for many developing countries. For instance, in 2012, ODA represented 68% of total external finance for development in least developed countries, the LDCs. Against this backdrop, Turkey, which assumed the G20 presidency as of 1st of December 2014, has placed development at the center of its G20 agenda and priorities. Our primary focus is on further enhancing the integration of developing and low-income countries into the world economy through concrete and growth-oriented actions. During our presidency, we have decided to emphasize the link between growth and investment. A particular focus is given to investment in infrastructure, which is quite vital for the sustainable and strong growth of low-income countries. We put efforts into bringing together the reforms that improve the investment climate and unlock private sector investment for both infrastructure and small and medium-sized enterprises. Distinguished participants, the deadline to meet the Millennium Development Goals, MDGs, is fast approaching. 2015 will be a key year for development cooperation. The past 2015 development agenda should be considered as a framework for developed countries to provide ODA and other means to assist the LDCs and the developing world in general in their efforts to achieve growth and prosperity. There are basically three very important global meetings in 2015 to shape this new agenda. The first one is the third International Conference on Financing for Development in July in Addis Ababa. The second, the UN Summit to adopt the post-2015 development agenda in September in New York. And the third is the 21st Conference of the Parties, COP21, on climate change in December in Paris. So we hope that you will all agree with us that the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, will be agreed upon and endorsed at the UN in September 2015. In this way, as part of the efforts to modernize the concept of development finance, which is the main topic of this conference, the current definition of ODA, which dates back to 1972, is at the center of discussions, especially at the OECD. In this context, and with respect to the SDGs, we think that a more inclusive and sustainable future is needed. The aim should be a more inclusive and sustainable future. And for this, we need a holistic approach to development. The new reality about development finance is the fact that there is great diversity of funding than just a decade ago today, offering development countries a wider array of options to choose from with large potential benefits for their development. While LDCs and other low-income countries remain highly reliant on ODA as the key source of external finance for development, access to a more diverse range of sources of finance has increased mainly for middle-income countries. Non-concessional flows, both official and private, today play an increasingly important role in this regard. Therefore, ODA should be complemented by trade as well as private capital flows, including foreign direct investment, investment in infrastructure and microfinance facilities, which need to be mobilized into productive sectors and infrastructure projects. Engaging the private sector, philanthropic institutions, and civil society in partnership for development is essential. All existing resources should be mobilized. Dear friends, I would like to conclude by highlighting 2 points. First, despite their budgetary constraints, donor countries should do their utmost to keep their promises in providing development aid. The second point is that the recipients should also do their part. They should provide an enabling business environment for donors. In this context, they should enhance their governance structure, legal framework, rule of law, transparency, and accountability. For direct investment, you need to provide the necessary business environment in your country. Finally, let me point out with great pleasure once again, as it was stated by Dr. Cham, that Turkey has been a dynamic actor in the international development cooperation architecture. And I think everybody knows that development cooperation has been part of our foreign policy. It has been an integral part of our foreign policy. And the huge amount that we provided in 2013, I think the figure is 3.3 or 3.4 billion dollars, constitutes 0.41 percentage point of our GDP, and it's below the average of the OECD. I would like to leave the details to the distinguished experts present here with us today and give the floor to His Excellency António Martins do CRUZ, the former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Portugal. But before doing so, let me just ask the distinguished speakers to limit their interventions to 15 minutes maximum so that we can allow for a discussion period, for questions and answer period. Thank you. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I would like to start by thanking CETA, the CETA General Coordinator, and TICA President for this invitation, and also thank my good friend Sadiq Unai, the Director of Economy in CETA. In 2003, let me come back some years ago. In 2003, 11 years ago, I was Foreign Minister of Portugal when the European Council adopted the European Security Strategy. The full name of the document was Secure Europe in a Better World. It was what is called in international relations a comprehensive document trying to define for the first time the European security environment, identifying key challenge and political implications for the European Union. And the first paragraph was a roadmap. Europe, and I quote, "Europe has never been so prosperous, so secure, and so free." If you read the press this morning, or at least last week, you probably realize that Europe is not secure. Look at the situation in Ukraine, for instance, and the conflicts in the European environment. Europe is not free. Europe is not able to face and to assure a free environment. And the reactions in some European countries after what happens in Paris and Copenhagen are unfortunately xenophobic. And this was interesting today. Europe is not prosperous. The financial, economic, and social crisis in a few countries and the political crisis are changing Europe. That's why probably because the governments have not adequate answers. If you look carefully to the Eurozone countries, for instance, after 2008, all governments lost elections. Well, with the exception of Mrs. Merkel, who lost the coalition. Austerity is transforming a financial and economic challenge into a political crisis in some European countries. And the new world is emerging. Sometimes seems to be a world with a zero-sum game. More influence of some partners means less presence of others. And the rise of these new powers, the number of fragile states, the lack of resources, and the insufficient attention to human and social developments demonstrate that we need new levels of ambition. All these aspects are linked and affect development aid, where Europe and the European Union state members are important players. Let me concentrate a few minutes in my own country perspective. Portugal, as you probably know, has a strong commitment with the promotion of sustainable development in the context of democracy, respect of human rights, and the rule of law in partner countries. And this commitment is shared by all sectors of the Portuguese society and by all political backgrounds. by its historical link, relations with the key partner countries, and I'm referring to the African countries who speak Portuguese, and of course East Timor in Asia. These are long-term based on similar legal structures, as well as ties of friendship of cooperation. Since 2010, however, Portugal is confronted with a serious economic crisis, which resulted in the signing of Economic and Financial Assistance Program in May 2011. To restore the confidence of international financial markets and to promote competitiveness and sustainable economic growth, the assistance program was based in three pillars: fiscal consolidation, financial stability, and structural transformation of the Portuguese society. This structural adjustment program was also reflected in the declining volume of ministerial budgets, as reflected in the reduction of the resources available for development cooperation activities. ODA levels decreased correspondingly. However, despite this adverse context and change, Portugal remains committed to the international undertakings, in particular to reach 0.7% ODA GNI as economic situation so permits. After a decade since the adoption of the last strategic document of the Portuguese cooperation, was essential to adopt a new strategic guideline to update in this area and to respond in a pragmatic way the evolution and dynamics of the international architecture for cooperation, and to respond also the major changes in some of our partner countries, which improve their levels of development and have enhanced level of partnership to new levels, assuming more leadership and responsibility sharing. A new strategic concept of the Portuguese cooperation 2014-2020 was approved recently with four key principles. Promote the implementation of the programs, coherence and coordination, geographic and sectorial concentration, ownership, and partner. This is a guiding instrument, and the new strategic concept will be, we hope, more operational and pragmatic, more target for actors and instruments. The program, our program of ODA, remains highly concentrated in Africa, as I mentioned, the Portuguese-speaking countries and East Timor. In sectoral terms, its focus priorities and needs of partner countries, mainly the development of human and institutional capacities in areas such as education, health, government, and civil society. Commitments will be with institutional learning, communications, and accountability, and will be implemented on the basis of a 3-year plan assessment. Development education is a priority in this strategic concept and an important area of action. A strategic and coordinated approach to humanitarian aid is also relaunched, and Portugal intends to take an integrated vision with a medium-long-term perspective, such as strengthening resilience in households, communities and country partners, together with the disaster risk reduction. Those are the new challenges and the new answers of the Portuguese development system. They reflect also the evolution of the international architecture for cooperation, and at the same time, an adaptation to the austerity situation in Portugal, the new environment in Europe, and also the changes in partner countries, especially Angola, Mozambique, and East Timor. Commitments are also connected with European Union priorities, OECD policies and guidelines, and the Millennium Development Goals. Policy coherence for development has been politically accepted as a key factor and a key principle of the Portuguese cooperation. Finally, and also at a multilateral level, the Portuguese Commonwealth, the Community of Portuguese-Speaking Countries, CPLP, is, as I told, a priority instrument for our foreign aid policy. Maximizing this impact is another challenge with adequate policies coordination mechanisms. As all the countries and institutions represented here today, our goal is also a greater coherence between objectives and results. Finally, Mr. Chairman, just a few ideas for the conceptual issues of this conference. A new paradigm for foreign aid needs to be implemented, and we need to frame this opportunity. The new aid trends are, first of all, multilateral. Multilateral trends aid has expanded over time, is already 1/5 of the total net ODA and double in the last 20 years. The second trend is private aid donors. In the US, they represent now more than 50% of global aid. The PDA, Private Development Assistant, is a large concept which includes not only private assistance by private actors, I mean individual foundations, corporations, universities, or even religious organizations, but also promotion of economic development and humanitarian aid. And finally, they also include sometimes concessional financial terms, including commodities and loans. And those, in my opinion, are not really private assistance, but political or business decision to increase influence and energy and commodity supply for certain countries. The third trend is the new architecture aid. We notice that there are more and more bilateral donors, more and more recipient countries, more multilateral agencies all over the world, more NGOs, and especially more private sector groups. I believe we need to increase the ratio of private sector versus public sector. And finally, the complexity of aid system and tools are growing, and we need more coordination and planning, new tools to measure the results, transparent standards and allocation of rules accordingly, and probably a new dialogue like this today for better scaling up and better information sharing. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. da Cruz, for your comprehensive contribution to this session. In your statement, you mentioned implementation. You highlighted the importance of implementation and political ownership. In fact, implementation is one of our priorities during our G20 presidency. We have inclusiveness, investment, and implementation. Implementation is important for all, and political ownership also, as you rightly said, because the main reason behind the success of the Millennium Development Goals was the high political ownership. And we hope that we will have the same level of ownership when we will agree on the post-2015 Sustainable Development Goals with respect to ownership. And also you mentioned the OECD. The OECD, you may recall that in 1961 it was established to provide policy guidance and evidence-based analysis to enhance economic cooperation and development. It is cooperation and development, the OECD. So, and recently, I'm glad to inform you that the OECD is working on a very substantial and important project, which is called the New Approaches to Economic Challenges. And here, their aim is also to develop a new economic development agenda, which will be more inclusive, which will be an inclusive agenda to cover also all vulnerable groups. So development is in order to avoid future crises and to avoid social and economic the problems. They are now developing a new development agenda, which is more inclusive, more sustainable, and to take care of not only the developed world, but also the low-income countries and the least developed countries. So the inclusiveness is within the countries and also among countries. It's very important. So now let me give the floor to my friend, the UN resident coordinator and UNDP resident representative in Turkey, Mr. Kamal Malhotra. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair. The distinguished President of TICA, Mr. Serdar Cham, Mr. Burhanettin Duran, General Coordinator of SETA in Turkey, my friend Ambassador Mithat Rende, the Permanent Representative of Turkey to the OECD, and the moderator of the panel, Excellencies, speakers in the panel, distinguished participants. I am very pleased to be addressing you in this conference on the changing nature of development aid from past to future, particularly because this topic is very relevant to the UN's and UNDP's work with the government of Turkey, and more specifically our cooperation with TICA. In fact, in June 2014, UNDP co-organized, together with TICA, an international conference with a very similar theme, which was focused on the future of development cooperation, particularly the role of the emerging countries and other new players, aiming to contribute to the preparations of the United Nations Development Cooperation Forum, which was held in New York in July 2014. With approximately 300 participants, including ministers and representatives of civil society, academia, and international organizations from both North and South, that conference was widely regarded as a successful effort to bring together a diverse group of policymakers and practitioners in the area of development cooperation to look at its future, given the changing global geopolitical landscape and architecture, as well as emerging new players and modalities of development cooperation. It also created an open platform to discuss development cooperation in post-conflict settings, as well as the linkages between philanthropy and development assistance, the role of the private sector in development, the role of the least developed countries, the small island development states, and the post-2015 agenda, among other topics. As a concrete output of that conference, the 20 or so recommendations of the conference were presented at the Development Cooperation Forum at the UN in New York in July 2014 as a room paper. And this Development Cooperation Forum is unique because it is the only forum and platform that brings together traditional and emerging development cooperation providers together. The agreements reached at that joint TICA-UNDP conference was to continue organizing such events more regularly in order to contribute to knowledge building and sharing on international development cooperation and its modalities. Therefore, I see this event as another important contribution in this context. Ladies and gentlemen, let me now briefly comment on the emerging global development agenda. As has been indicated already, we are close to the target date of the Millennium Development Goals, which is the end of 2015. Let's take a moment to reflect on the incredible development progress the world has made over the last 15 years. Most children now enroll in a primary school, and gender parity in primary schooling has been largely achieved. Greater progress has been made in areas targeted by the health MDGs than pre-MDG trends would have suggested. At the global level, The goal of halving extreme poverty was met 5 years ahead of the target date, while one of the biggest contributions of the MDGs was to focus international attention on the need for a global development partnership and on our shared humanity. And this was the focus of MDG 8. And even though enough progress on this has not been made, the fact that we are now looking and talking about a sustainable development agenda, which is universal and will apply equally to the richest countries and the poorest countries, I think is one of the outcomes of the MDGs in itself. And that is a paradigm shift in itself. Now, if we look at the new development landscape, the world has changed significantly since the adoption of the Millennium Declaration in 2000. Despite the progress made and as a result of the MDGs, important gaps remain. The geography of poverty has evolved. Inequality is on the rise. The challenge of sustainable development is even more pressing today than it was in the year 2000. Meanwhile, a multipolar world economy has taken shape. Emerging economies play a much greater role in development cooperation. So do an array of new and emerging actors, including but not limited to southern providers of development cooperation, the private sector, philanthropic and civil society organizations. All these actors generate innovative approaches, vital new data, as well as new resources and tools which enrich our collective development cooperation efforts. The international community is also now close to agreeing new sustainable development goals for the post-2015 period. Indeed, the international community has come a long way in its deliberations on the new development agenda, quite apart from the paradigm shift to a universal agenda that I mentioned earlier. Throughout 2014, UN member states exchanged views and consolidated their ideas through the work of existing UN development entities. Member states have emphasized that sustainable development must be inclusive and people-centered, and have underscored the importance of holistic and integrated approaches to sustainable development that will guide humanity to live in harmony with the planet's ecosystem. Following more than a year of inclusive and consultative deliberations and unprecedented global consultations, 17 specific goals with 169 associated targets described as, and I quote, action-oriented, global in nature, and universally applicable, and I end of quote, have been proposed in an attempt to combine aspirational global targets with country-specific targets to be set nationally. This discussion highlights many emerging aspects of development cooperation. As stated by United Nations Secretary General, His Excellency Ban Ki-moon, and I quote, the year 2015 can be a turning point in human development if we agree on a path to resilience through strong agreements on disaster risk reduction, development financing, climate change, and a new set of sustainable development goals, end of quote. Indeed, 2015 is a once-in-a-generation year for development because a number of major global processes will come to conclusion in the course of this year. Some have already been mentioned, but I'll repeat them because these are United Nations processes. The Sendai Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction has just been held in Japan. In July, in Ethiopia, the third international conference on financing for development will take place. Multiple sources of finance will be needed for the new Global Sustainable Development Agenda and for future development cooperation efforts, and these will be discussed and hopefully agreed in Addis. The Addis conference will be followed by two other critical processes: a likely agreement on the finalization of the Sustainable Development Goals and the post-2015 agenda by heads of state and government in September at the United Nations in New York, and the finalization of a new global agreement on climate change in December in Paris. During one single year, 2015, we have the unique opportunity and responsibility to adopt a far-reaching sustainable development agenda till at least 2030. Adapt the global financial system to more specifically address development financing needs, and respond in a decisive manner to the challenge of human-induced climate change. Never before has the world had to face such a complex agenda or been provided with such a major opportunity for global change in a single year. Ladies and gentlemen, let me now turn to some recent trends in international development cooperation. Development cooperation encompasses both multiple modalities of relationships between countries and multiple sources of finance. Let me, however, focus on ODA, Overseas Development Assistance, which is still the most important in the least developed country context, and which is a priority for Turkey. While other sources of finance are much larger in volume, ODA is often still the largest source of finance for some least developed countries, and in so many other low-income countries. ODA will continue to be a critical source of development finance after 2015. Yet, the use of ODA needs to be rethought so as to meet both established and new demands and to adapt to a unified and universal development agenda. ODA can be better targeted compared with other sources of finance to help ensure inclusiveness and access to public services. It can leverage other sources of development finance or improve their targeting, and it can help put the world on a pathway to sustainability. Further progress on ODA quality, transparency, and accountability will also be critical. We also need to think carefully about where to allocate aid to achieve the biggest impact. The global community will look for modalities to go beyond the traditional dialogue on aid quantity and effectiveness at the 3rd International Conference on Financing for Development that will be held in Addis Ababa this July. We also need to be clearer about how climate finance will fit alongside ODA. All of us agree that more climate finance is needed and that this should not be diverted from or be at the expense of resources already committed to the eradication of poverty. A greater clarity on the additionality of climate finance and the differences between traditional ODA modalities and those for climate finance is therefore urgently required. This is all the more urgent because there is a clear sense that while poverty eradication will remain the central imperative after 2015, sustainable development will also move to center stage, as reflected in the current work on sustainable development goals. All countries, rich and poor, will need continued support to pursue the Sustainable Development Goals, hopefully agreed in New York in September 2015. But the kind of support needed will change over time and be different for countries at different stages of development. A different mix of financial support, capacity building, knowledge sharing, and technology transfer will be required in each national context. An enabling macroeconomic environment and international financial cooperation and greater policy coherence between aid and non-aid policies such as trade, debt, agricultural subsidies, financial and tax regulations, and technology will also be critical for all countries. Now, if I turn to South-South cooperation, one of the major advances in recent decades has been the creation of development cooperation agencies or specialized divisions cutting across respective ministries in order to integrate South-South cooperation into the core agenda of many emerging and other southern providers of development assistance. This reflects an important shift in the paradigm from being donor-centric with a give-and-take mentality to the conception of development cooperation as a more genuine partnership. Turkey is playing a critical role in this paradigm shift alongside the People's Republic of China, India, and Brazil, amongst some other major emerging countries. In 2012, developing countries accounted for nearly half of world gross domestic product. But by 2020, just 3 of them, Brazil, the People's Republic of China, and India, are projected to account for more world output than Canada, France, Germany, Italy, the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and the United States of America combined. All regions of the South have experienced growth. These unprecedented achievements and prospects, in combination with the rapid spread of electronic connectivity across the South, point to a new strength and effectiveness of South-South cooperation. Moreover, by 2025, the traditional South is likely to comprise 600 million households who will have annual incomes of over $20,000 per annum. And the traditional South will have an overall annual consumption of $30 trillion. Over the past decade, there has also been a significant increase in the quantity and quality of South-South cooperation, as well as in its transformative impact. The value of sharing knowledge, experiences, and technologies can be seen across different sectors, such as trade, investment, and infrastructure, including the creation of a BRICS bank, in health and the social sectors, and in renewable energy through new partnerships and cooperation amongst southern countries. According to the most recent report of the United Nations Secretary General on the state of South-South cooperation, its volume between 2006 and 2011 more or less doubled, reaching US 16 to 19 billion, which is roughly equivalent to 10% of total public financing flows for development globally. These figures, however, understate the actual volume of South-South cooperation flows because appropriate tools for their measurement are yet to be devised, and there are many gaps in the data. South-South cooperation offers a good collaborative framework for helping to boost the productive capacities of the least developed countries in line with the Istanbul Program of Action for the LDCs. By supporting LDCs' capacities to trade, attract investment, and to participate in production networks and value chains, seeking to meet the growing demands for goods and services of both the expanding middle class in the south and markets in the north. Turkey is one of the important southern providers and indeed one of the most dynamic members of the current and future emerging family of development cooperation. As has already been stated, its ODA has increased in the past years to over $3 billion in 2013, making it one of the top 4 emerging countries in development cooperation. Let me now just turn, before I conclude, to the United Nations and UNDP as long-term supporters of South-South cooperation. Support for South-South and triangular cooperation, which includes countries from the north, by UN organizations and agencies has surged in recent years. Many UN organizations have included South-South and triangular cooperation in their strategic plans. They have sponsored South-South policy dialogues through the exchange of knowledge and experience, in addition to South-South collaboration in research and analysis. And the UN is also supporting appropriate South-South regional integration efforts, and these are some amongst many initiatives. UNDP has also placed South-South and triangular cooperation at the core of its new strategic plan for the period 2014-2017, building on the roles it has played as a knowledge broker, a builder of capacity, and a facilitator of exchanges between developing countries. Its 2014-2017 strategic plan anchors support for South-South cooperation in 2 explicit ways. First, by hosting the United Nations Office for South-South Cooperation, through which we will continue our work to strengthen UN system-wide support for and coordination of South-South cooperation. And second, by utilizing UNDP's country and program reach, through which we aim to provide a global, grounded, operational arm for South-South cooperation, which is accessible to the broader UN system and more broadly. UNDP's global policy centers in Brazil, Kenya, the Republic of Korea, Singapore, and Turkey are also facilitating South-South policy coordination and related interactions, which we also support through our 7 strategic partnership agreements with Brazil, the People's Republic of China, India, Indonesia, Mexico, South Africa, and Turkey. We are also working at their request to strengthen the institutional capacity of development cooperation agencies in several emerging countries. Ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude by saying that the role and importance of South-South cooperation cannot be overstated in the lead up to the post-2015 development agenda. Access to diverse sources of financing, knowledge, expertise and experience, and innovation will be even more important if we are to achieve the proposed Sustainable Development Goals. I would like to thank you, and particularly the Turkish International Cooperation and Coordination Agency, as well as SETA, for providing the UN and UNDP through me with the opportunity to address you here today. I am sure that you will find today's discussions very valuable, and they will be enriched by all your contributions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Malhotra, for this very illuminating contribution, presentation. In your statement, you rightly said that ODA will continue to be an important element and it will have a critical role in the years to come. It is very true, but we hope that we will have other sources of finance. It's true that it should be inclusive and people-centered aid. And I agree, and thank you so much for especially emphasizing the role of South-South cooperation. Of course, during the recent decade, especially when we faced the economic downturn in the West, then we had new emerging economies who achieved great economic growth. And then they emerged as not only new powers, economic powers, but also as donors. And it is very important that that in the years to come, that they should continue to play this important role. But as I stated in my introductory remarks, the developed world should continue to abide by their commitments. And it became clear that if we need to achieve growth and to avoid future global crises, we need to be inclusive and to embrace the vulnerable groups and also the low-income countries. And we need to not only provide ODA, but also to avoid, for example, protectionist measures and encourage them to trade with us. So it has to be a two-way street, not only to sell them goods, but also to buy goods. And this is part of, I think, the new development agenda to encourage trade also and all forms of cooperation. Thank you so much. And now I will give the floor to Mr., and I hope I can pronounce your name, sir, properly, Jung-Soo DOO. Is it? Yes. It's okay. So the Vice President of KOICA, Korean Development Agency, is it?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Before beginning my presentation, I'd like to take this opportunity to convey to all of you that the Korean people keep our sincere appreciation and gratitude for the support and sacrifice that Turkish people demonstrated when the Korean War broke out 65 years ago. Therefore, I have to confess that I'm extremely happy to be here because this is my first visit to our brother country. And it's an honor for me to be able to speak at this important conference. And I'd like to thank President of TICA and General Coordinator Mr. Duran of SETA for this wonderful opportunity. Now, going back to my presentation, I'd like to share with you the dynamic development experience of South Korea. I use the word dynamic since Korea is one of a few countries in the world to turn itself from a least developed country to an official member of OECD DOO. I'd like to first touch on how Korea, a war-stricken, underdeveloped recipient country, overcome the abject poverty utilizing development assistance from the world, and how Korea works together with other partners in facing global challenges in development assistance. Korea is known as the country that has undergone the miracle of Han River. After the end of 36-year colonial rule of Japan, the Korean government was established in 1948, but unfortunately, the tragic fratricidal Korean War broke out in just 2 years later, destroying the entire society. The damage of war was severe. The agricultural production was reduced by 27%, while the annual GDP was cut by 14%. More than 5 million people were killed, injured, or missing. Per capita GDP of Korea in 1953 was only around $73, approximately the same as that of many African countries. The life expectancy in 1960 was only 52 years, while the infant mortality rate was as high as 7%. With strong commitment in development from the top leadership and appropriate national development planning in the 1960s to 70s, Korea was able to achieve remarkable economic and social development in a relatively short period of time. Particularly, the proper mixture of state intervention and entrepreneurial activity of private sector enabled rapid industrial transformation, resulting in drastic export increase and GDP growth. In parallel, the Korean government launched a rural community development program called 새마을 운동, literally New Village Movement, in the 1970s, during reducing urban and rural development gap and expediting equitable growth. Villages in Korea until the beginning of the 1970s had no other stories than extreme poverty, hunger, and disease. Also, it is well known that many Koreans had to be sent to Germany for dangerous mining jobs, to Middle East for construction work, to simply earn much needed foreign currency. Young girls went to factories to make a living for themselves and their families, and had to work under hardship and sometimes discrimination. The strong devotion and efforts of Korean people for development were also backed by foreign assistance. From 1945 to 1995, Korea had received more than $12 billion worth of aid from the world. This assistance played a pivotal role in Korea's post-war recovery and economic reconstruction. Thanks to concerted efforts of the Korean people, as well as assistance from outside, Korea has recorded an unprecedented economic and social advancement. According to IMF, Korea's GDP per capita is projected to exceed $30,000 this year to 2015, which will be an astounding some 400-fold increase compared with that of 1953. Bearing the lessons learned from the experience as a recipient country for 5 decades, Korea is now playing an active role as a donor country in the global aid community. In 2010, Korea joined OECD DOO and became the 21st member country. Korea also opened the Global Forum for Development Partnerships by hosting G20 in 2010, where the Seoul Development Consensus on Shared Growth was formulated. Korea also hosted the first high-level forum on aid effectiveness in Busan in 2011, which produced the Busan Global Partnership Principle. Busan Principle became one of key standards on development effectiveness in post-2015 agenda setting. Korea's total commitment to ODA 2015 is about $2.2 billion. Even though the ratio to GNI is still well below from what the UN has recommended, the ratio of growth in volume is one of the highest among donor countries. KOICA is carrying out about 30% of the total amount under its direct control, while managing a variety of partnership and supportive programs with Korea Exim Bank, private sector, and those specially delegated by the government, such as Poverty Reduction Special Fund. KOICA is conducting integrated development projects and technical cooperation programs in over 120 countries. KOICA also invites around 5,000 civil servants in developing countries annually and provides training programs and capacity building opportunities. In addition, KOICA runs overseas volunteer program, dispatching more than 4,000 volunteers annually. Also, KOICA has expanded knowledge sharing service on development issues through seminars, workshops, and forums in close partnership with main international organizations and research institutions. As a result, many developing nations consider Korea as an exemplary model for economic development and are trying to benchmark Korea's development experience. 새마을 운동, 새마을 movement is one case. Over 30 countries are planning to adopt and implement 새마을 movement. Also, there are growing needs for collaboration with KOICA in ICT development area as well. KOICA also continues to make its assistance more effective by working together with diverse partners. Last year was the 20th anniversary of the KOICA's cooperation with the civil society. The budget has been boosted almost 100 times compared to that of 1995. KOICA is currently working with about 130 partners and has committed $4.5 million to fund, $40 million to fund projects of its partners in 2015. Korean NGOs and academia are helping people in need in remote areas by promoting education and health, increasing revenue, empowering women, and building ownership, etc., where government's hands do not reach out. The Korean civil society is now engaged in as many as 103 countries with more than 1,400 projects standing around the globe. In total, $3.8 billion has been raised from Korean citizens and benevolent patrons to help the poor and the marginalized people in developing countries, including such remote countries as Mali and Burkina Faso. We do not only fund, but we try to leverage the funding and resources from the partners, not only domestic, but also worldwide. KOICA is very keen to seek for innovative partners with prestigious global NGOs and foundations that will bring a far-reaching impact and value for investment we commonly make. Currently, the world community is going to agree upon a new set of global development agendas for the post-2015 era. Stakeholders and actors are working and negotiating hard to reach a consensus by this fall. However, there is a growing concern on the shortage of financial resources required to implement a huge number of infrastructure projects for sustainable and inclusive growth. The financial gap worldwide is estimated at trillions of dollars. As a part of broader efforts to address these challenges, OECD DOO members have already started discussions on designing a new model of investment partnership where ODA and private funds and investors can work together. In this regard, I would like to introduce a new partnership program called Development Action Program that KOICA has adopted this year. It aims to design new joint projects in equal partnership with other development actors by incorporating new content and innovative methods. Firstly, KOICA has started to search actively for partnership with technology-intensive SMEs and research institutions in order to apply new and appropriate technologies to grant aid projects. This program also aims to explore creative development model, encouraging scientific accomplishment on value creation. Second, KOICA will contribute to creating places of work and boosting economic growth in developing countries by establishing strategic partnerships with big private companies who wish to make a contribution with their CSR fund or explore new social investment and inclusive business model. Third, KOICA is actively expanding global partnership programs with other aid agencies and international organizations, such as USAID, GIZ, AFD, JICA, and UNDP, UNICEF, WFP, etc., to address complex, emergent, and crucial global challenges. Allow me to introduce some concrete projects that KOICA is actively working on with other donor agencies. For example, KOICA and USAID are working together on a global health challenge program, particularly maternal health program in Ghana and Ethiopia. A pilot program on green growth is being carried out in Vietnam. Some Korean IT corporations have joined in mobile health promotion in Ghana. KOICA is also cooperating with the German GIG on establishing a health insurance system in Nepal. The two agencies are also working together in Mongolia to build capacity for international competition in vocational technology. KOICA and the French AFD are jointly providing a grant to Côte d'Ivoire to help it find a permanent solution to the water supply problem in the city of Abidjan. The two agencies are now discussing ways to cooperate on waste management and to jointly finance new projects on environmental protection and public transportation. Recently, when Ebola threatened to destroy the lives of so many people in the West African region, the Korean government took part in the global efforts to fight against the tragic challenge. Korea is among the 7 countries are operating at a national level medical unit in Sierra Leone in collaboration with the UK government. In conclusion, KOICA will continue to make effort to become an extensive platform for effective programs, knowledge sharing, innovative ideas, and generous contributions from the private sector. We will strengthen our partnership and expand our network with various public and private institutions in and outside of Korea, recipient countries, and other donor partners as well. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. DOO. First of all, thank you for your kind words regarding our friendship and the Turkish people. For the Turkish people, we have really developed similar feelings, and I think it's obvious that the Koreans are very popular here in Turkey, and I think you know that, especially during the World Cup, which we all co-organized. We have witnessed very emotional moments. So thank you also for this presentation, and dear colleagues and friends, it's obvious that Korea during the last 60 years achieved an impressive level of development, and you summarize this. It is by all means an impressive development. To reach $600 billion of exports in 60 years is with 30% of the exports, 30% of high technology products. This is a big achievement, and I think Korea reached this level of development through quality education first and foremost. They are hardworking people, but the quality education, access to quality health, and also another point which I believe it's important, you managed to achieve and realize close cooperation between the state institutions, the universities, and the private sector. I was told by one of your colleagues that, for example, Samsung has hundreds of research facilities and research unit centers in different universities in Korea. This is what we should do, and maybe we should also advise the low-income countries and the developing world to apply this best practice. And we thank you very much for being very active at the DAC, the Development Assistance Committee within the OECD, and we hope that you will be more even generous in the years to come towards the developing world. Thank you. Now, sorry, I think we have a disruption. Now, the last speaker is Terwin. Okay. So now the last speaker is Mr. Al-Mansour Fatan. My friend is the senior advisor to the president of the Islamic Development Bank, and he will share with us his views. My intention, we have 30 minutes. My intention is to conclude this session at 1 o'clock. And so you will have 10-15 minutes to speak, and then we will have some time for answers and for questions and answers. Thank you.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala Rasulillah. Thank you, Excellency, Ambassador Mithat. Thank you, and Excellency Dr. Sardar Shah, Excellency Burhanuddin Duran. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'm very thankful for this opportunity to talk on an important subject. But I should congratulate Turkey for the firm leadership agenda that has yielded high growth, that has driven the economy with innovation, and that is now showing marvelous results. Turkey has been able to build a model. it has succeeded to look deeper inside of the priorities and challenges of development and to evolve, achieving comprehensive vision of transition from poverty to prosperity and human dignity. I also congratulate Turkey for the prominent initiatives to create new vehicles to help developing countries to rise in the emerging multipolar world and to influence the global development agenda. This gathering is within that perspective. I would like to address the changing nature of development aid from past to future, from institutional and country perspectives, because this is a very important subject. First, when we talk about from past to future, we need to take a look at the past, to take stock of several parameters. Among those, tangibility of the impact. What development performance has been achieved, measured by the number and size of countries that have graduated from poverty thanks to development aid. That's one measure. Second, we need to assess how much and how effective teamwork between aid development agencies and countries, how much they have achieved and how much they have missed to accomplish, and certainly what do they do to do more in order to keep relevant and pertinent to the emancipation of the poor. Whatever any one of the parties can claim, countries or institutions, unfortunately, the count of graduating countries, of countries that have graduated from underdevelopment, is not commensurate with the extent of effort and quantum of aid that has been provided in the past. So there is a performance deficiency. Let's look at these from three angles. One is the development perspective. And unfortunately, we witness a growing number of failing states with systematic de-development. A few minutes ago, one of our eminent speakers says that even Europe is eroding. Second, the extent of which solidarity and cooperation have been working. Unfortunately, we observe a rising number of conflicts and cross-border problems causing lose-lose results on development. Third, from identity perspective, an African Development Bank or an Islamic Development Bank or an Asian Development Bank or bilateral aid, mainly. Bilateral aid, His Excellency Sahin Noman Korkmush just mentioned, gave examples about the demoralized assistance, aiming to deepen exploitation and hegemony rather than an interested altruist win-win paradigm. I summarize his statement. It is because of the need of an independent critique that the Islamic Development Bank is seeking member countries and partner institutions' assessment of its performance on those fronts and of its journey towards a world-class institution. Please feel free to contribute. Let me tell you that this exercise has been embarked upon by many development banks during the last few years. The early lessons are alarming. What do we see? There are deficiencies in 3 C's. The first C is the communication and mutual interest between the donors and the beneficiaries, the communities. The second C relates to the commitment to continuous process improvement by the donors themselves. want to change in order to cope with the needs that are changing and growing. The third C is about creativity and innovation. We are seeing more of the same. In spite of the crisis that has been witnessed in 2008 and the call for change by the reality on the ground. Now, the major lesson that development banks and donors, together with countries, need to learn is that there is an increasing income and dignity divide in the world. And that is causing, unfortunately, more and more crises and tensions throughout the world. We have also internally, the donor institutions and donor countries are facing another internal challenge, that is the ability to assess their performance on the ground. There is, for banks, a financial rating. We know that AAA rating, et cetera, et cetera. But for development action, unfortunately, this rating has not been able to be developed, to come to reality. There are some attempts to make some evaluation of the work. But without that evaluation, we cannot pretend that we have impacted development. One of the problems that is very difficult to measure, and it's constituting a primary factor in the divide between the donor community and the recipient community, is the ability to cope with the moral and political pressures towards responsiveness and sustainability. Donors are more celebrating ephemeral wins and losing focus on the tools that can help them to readdress the direction. We need also to encourage knowledge and experiences and cultures to be embedded into the development process. His Excellency Deputy Prime Minister was evoking now the concept of al-birr. And he was alluding to the ayah, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ليس البر أن تولوا وجوهكم قبل المشرق والمغرب ولكن البر من آمن بالله واليوم الآخر والملائكة والكتاب والنبيين وآتى المال على حبه ذوي القربى واليتامى والمساكين وابن السبيل والسائلين وفي الرقاب.
Could you translate it, please?
I cannot translate the Quran.
Yeah, for the
but I think
interpreters won't do it.
I'm so ignorant. But I think he mentioned the al-birr. Al-birr is that altruism in donation. It is the win-win to the best form of its construction. It is very important in this regard. That, yes, I fully agree with His Excellency the Deputy Prime Minister that this ayah is a response to more than 90% of the ills of aid that we can identify. So that is a very important transformation that we can do. I would like to conclude because I have 4 minutes left by suggesting that the current presidency of G20 in Turkey, the future OIC summits, the future humanitarian summit, the future conference of the UN on the SDGs, the post-2015, the new initiatives launched by Turkey to have a development bank to work, to address the challenges related to greater, unfortunately, development divide can be used to have some specific shifts. The first shift is mobilizing more values as important resources from within as compared to copying others. We need to marry the lessons learned from the best practices of the world and the intrinsic values within the beneficiary communities. We need to let those communities feel that they are important and that their legacy is constructive. This has not been the practice in the past. We need also to be more selective in projects and tailoring projects according to the context of each country. Projects are rather now moved by other considerations than the priority of impact on the development. We need to mainstream Islamic finance. It is promising, it is growing, and it is now on the agenda of the Bretton Woods institutions. We thank His Excellency Dr. Babajan, because next week, in April, he is going to address an IMF forum on this particular subject. We need also, in this, to take really innovation and financial engineering in response of the development problems to a new level. It has been stagnant for a while, and new products are not commensurate with the changing conditions. Sukuk is a way to respond to the growing need to finance infrastructure, but also for including and for making sure that no one is left behind. Zakat and awqaf are very important instruments. We need to unleash their power. We need to revisit the role of aid in the area of cooperation and solidarity. This is something, unfortunately, that is being, has not been attended to in the past. We need also to take more care of Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. We need to have quick wins. The economy of Niger is small. The economy of Comoro is small. We can achieve some wins in graduating some countries and having them putting poverty behind them. We need to focus on the perspective of graduation from poverty to prosperity. Quick wins are possible. The last Ebola has been mentioned. Unfortunately, the tarding response has been a sign of some apathy from the world towards the calamity of the poorest. The worst is that the rise of Ebola was because of the failure of development work in the countries. Had development been effective, the resilience would have been better, and we wouldn't face that result. Mr. Chairman, I'm now at the last minutes, so I should take it as an opportunity to thank you very much, and wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you so much, Mr. Al-Mansour, for a very stimulating statement, contribution. Thank you for emphasizing the importance of communication between donors and beneficiaries. Thank you for emphasizing the importance of creativity and innovation, and also the importance of access to resources you mentioned also in your statement. Access to resources is a great problem, especially in Africa. Just a few days ago, we organized a meeting at our residence in in Paris with the participation of major energy companies, representatives of major energy companies, ambassadors, and also the chief economist of the International Energy Agency, Dr. Birol, who has been recently appointed as the next executive director of the International Energy Agency. And there we discussed this access to energy and lack of access to energy, especially in Sub-Sahara. Unfortunately, the problem is infrastructure, lack of infrastructure. And Africa has a huge potential, for example, in the field of energy, solar, wind, and especially hydropower, and with so much resources. But then the problem is how to access these resources. There is no infrastructure, no roads, no highways, no railways, no airports. And also another problem is security. Foreign direct investors would like to go and invest, but there's no security as yet. So this is why it's so important, and I especially thank TICA for started very early to reach out to Africa, and thank you, Dr. Cham, for your personal engagement. It's impressive the way TICA has achieved and realized so many projects in Africa. And also, Mr. Al-Mansour, you mentioned that that we need to take into consideration the situation in the low-income countries, especially our Deputy Prime Minister in his keynote statement. He rightly said that we need to have a new approach, a new inclusive approach to when we devise the new agenda. We need to have this inclusive approach, and we cannot, in fact, live in peace and prosperity in the northern parts of the Mediterranean, the northern shores of the Mediterranean, when the other side, the south, is burning. And you see now we are facing this huge tragedy in the Middle East, in Syria and in Iraq and in Yemen, and I thank my friend Mr. Malhotra, who is also working very hard to take care of the Syrian refugees, contributing to Turkey's efforts. I personally thank you and your team. We cannot live in peace if our neighbors' houses are burning. So this is why it's very, very important to take and to embrace everybody in the interest of everybody. In fact, there are so many challenges, dear colleagues and friends, that there are so many challenges. They are of global nature, and you cannot approach them individually or at regional level. You need for global challenges, you need global solutions, and especially for climate change, the climate change financing. It's so important. We will have a huge conference in Paris, and if, for example, the developed world will not be forthcoming, they will not be promising and generous, we're not expecting to have a legally binding comprehensive settlement, because they have to offer the $100 billion of aid for climate financing. They have, otherwise the emerging countries and the developed world probably will not be in a position to make commitments and future pledges. So just having said that, I would like to thank all the panelists here and see if we have any comments and questions from the floor. Please do not hesitate to put questions to panelists or make short statements or short remarks, not statements, because then probably lunch will get cold. Do we have a cold or hot lunch anyway? I don't know, Mr. Burhanuddin. Yes, you have the floor. Okay, next, yes. Please, go ahead.
Okay, well, I mean, the United Nations has always been collaborating with NGOs, and UNDP has a civil society advisory committee at the global level and in many countries. If you're talking about the World Humanitarian Summit, this is, of course, going to happen in Istanbul in May of 2016, and the role of NGOs is going to be very significant in this, because this is not an intergovernmental process alone. This is it's the first World Humanitarian Summit, and all kinds of stakeholders, including NGOs, will have a major role and have been involved in the regional consultations that have been taking place in different regions of the world. So I guess it's fair to say that there will be a major role for NGOs. There are particular constraints if you're referring to registration and those kinds of issues in particular countries. Those are country specific, but they don't come from the UN side. Those come, if they are there, they come from the side of the respective governments, not from the UN side. So the UN certainly would welcome collaboration with NGOs and other civil society groups.
If I may add a few words, thank you. It's very important. Probably we missed this, the role of NGOs. It's so important, and the role of NGOs and other grassroots organizations in devising and formulating the new development agenda. It's quite important, and in fact, at OECD level, when we discuss a topic relating to economic cooperation or development, we make it sure that we have several sessions to consult with NGOs and to listen to their views, and also we receive their contributions in writing. And then it's very important. As regards the first humanitarian summit in Istanbul, it will be the first humanitarian summit. And we started dealing with the humanitarian aspects of development in 1985. In Turkey, we organized the first conference, the Humanitarian Development Conference, a Human Development Conference. So Turkey, this is Turkey's one of the Turkey's points, and we attach importance. We accord great importance to human development, and I hope that that the NGOs will continue to play their part and to contribute to this effort, to the international effort. However, sometimes we sense that certain NGOs, they would like to also play their own role in. We see them. I'll be very frank with you. We see certain NGOs in a self-serving exercises. Self-serving exercises. So this is, from time to time, you can see that. But of course, they don't constitute the majority. All in all, NGOs' contribution is very crucial, very important. Thank you. So I am advised to conclude at 1300 sharp, but I promised a friend there to take his question also, and then we will conclude.
Thank you so much. But I want to speak Turkish. So benim sorum Birleşmiş Milletler Türkiye temsilcisi hocamız olacak. Dünya ekonomisinin büyümesi, ülkelerin ekonomi durumunun gelişmesi için kaynakların verimli şekilde kullanılması çok önemlidir. Ama baktığımızda dünyada 1 milyar 600 milyon Müslüman yaşıyor ve birçok kaynaklar onların elinde. Ama Birleşmiş Milletler Güvenlik Konseyi baktığımızda Birleşmiş Milletler Güvenlik Konseyi'de bir Müslüman üye ülkesi olmadığı için dünyadaki bir sürü genel kararlarda bunların sesini onlara iletebilecek ve kararlarda eşdeğerli olacak bir durum söz konusu değil. Bu yüzden benim sorum şu olacak. Sizce böyle bir durumda ülkelerin eş denkli gelişmesi, ekonomi kalkınımının gelişmesi için dünyada nasıl bir gelecekte nasıl bir öngörüler olabilir ya da Müslüman ülkelerin temsilcisinin Birleşmiş Milletler Güvenlik Konseyi'de olmaması dünyada biz söylediğimiz bu eşlik ve beraber çalışmanın için nasıl bir unsur olabilir? Bunu sormak istedim.
I've been asked by the chair to be very short. Firstly, there is little doubt that everyone will agree that the UN Security Council needs reform. I don't think that's a matter of debate. However, the kind of reform that's been debated for the last 25 years has not been one which is based on bringing in any new members on the basis of religion, ethnicity, or any other such attributes. So, you know, I think that at least if we are here to promote greater world peace and greater integration, then the idea of having members, whether they are based on Christianity or Islam or any other religion, is not really what the UN would be promoting or member states are discussing. So I think I would stress again that there is an enormous and urgent need for UN Security Council reform. Obviously, the UN Security Council today does not represent the world as it's changed. But the debate there has been about bringing in emerging countries and other countries that represent in, large populations, the changed global geopolitical power structure, etc., etc. So I think that is the way the debate is going. It is not one that will end up, I hope, based on representation based on any religion.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Malhotra. So my intention is now to close the session. I thank you very much for your contributions and for your interest in this very important session. Thank you, and enjoy the lunch.